The Sega Genesis controller, an absolute classic. It fit the time period perfectly, the 16-bit era, since we were mostly dealing with 2D platformers. Sometimes you would have the isometric view, and very rarely something looked kind of 3D, but we weren't dealing with true 3D space like we were kind of the following generation, and then certainly going into, say, the Dreamcast or the PS2 era. But there is a beauty and simplicity with a controller like this. Still though, if we wanted to make the controller better, wanted to have a breakthrough in video game control, what would you do? The answer obviously is we got to remove the D-pad. And this brings us to a controller that I couldn't believe existed when I heard about this, and it was sort of presented to me as like one of the worst controllers ever, and I have not had any experience with this yet. I've kept it in the box this whole time because I wanted to do a video where we take a look at a company's the audacity here to replace the D-pad with touch controls? Yeah, I couldn't believe it either, but the Turbo Touch 360 trademark is indeed a real thing. And I can only assume that it came out, a few years into the Genesis system's life. And you can see no need to push, the longer play or your money back. This is more than 30 years later, and I still might look into that because I can't imagine removing the D-pad and this getting that much better. But take a look here. Gives you easy diagonal control, gives you circular control. There's just no caption for this one. And then no more blisters or numb thumb. So back then, we did have D-pads that could be kind of sharp, like the NES controller. I remember specifically, you could run into the side of it and it would, it wouldn't cut you, but you would feel the edge of the NES D-pad if you're going, say, from down to right or something. And Nintendo worked to smooth it out with the Super Nintendo controller. And then, of course, with the Genesis, they made a rolling D-pad, which worked very, very well for fighting games and even platformers, I'd say. But here, I guess they said, you know what, we'll remove the D-pad. If you got a blister on your thumb when using the D-pad, or it was just kind of sore there, you would just push through it. You wouldn't go, man, we got to get rid of this D-pad. The way this was presented to me, as I mentioned, it was on a podcast, it feels like for a long time ago now, but RGT said this is the controller he had to use when I think he went to his uncle's house. And again, I couldn't believe this was a thing, but it's sort of like when your friend would come over back in the day, you would give them the beat up Mad Catz controller. And you got the nice, clean first party controller, and you would just be surprised when you won. It's like, I don't know what's going on. How do I keep winning? Here it is. We have the manual. Oh wow, this is like old school paper even. Turbo Touch 360. This is, if after 30 days of use of your Touch 360 controller, you're not getting longer play and higher scores on your games, you may return the controller for a full refund. In the event of return of your Turbo Touch 360, must be accompanied by your original dated store cash register receipt. Yeah, I don't have that anymore. Simply slide your finger over or touch the sensor plate, direction, stop movement. Do not lie your thumb flat across the plates. So you have to like barely touch that was my other thing. When you use a D-pad on a normal controller, you would kind of just rest your thumb on, I don't know, any of the directions or something, right? Just ready to press down. Here, because this is supposed to be touch, if you rest it on the touchpad part, I assume it's going to detect it. That's why it's telling you to do this. Like if you look at look at that. Does that not look uncomfortable? Oh man, I don't know about that. Okay, so is there any give? There's no give to this. And it's also super concaved there. Oh, it at least has some markings, so you can tell if you're on, kinda? You're just gonna run into the sides the whole way. Okay, A, B, C, they seem fine. And then you have turbo, so you can turn on any of them, and then I assume you just press down, and it will just keep pressing it over and over and over again. Plastic's about you'd expect from this time period. Oh, the start button is mushy. I'm gonna test this. I have Genesis, I have one of the analog Genesis systems set up over here. So I'll fire that up with classic Sonic 2. All right, so here we are. This is the analog menu just before going into Sonic. I decided to, after I plugged it in, just kind of press up and down. It's detecting the button press at least, so the controller does work. But it's gonna come down to how responsive it is when we get into the game. So let's fire that up. I mean, it's working. There we go. Look at that. It's so the thing you're gonna run into, there's no feeling when you press down. There's like nothing. You are literally just touching a surface here. It does have, like I said, the marks, but going from like rolling, it's not great. Just trying to run through. Okay, so we do have, like, if you just hold it down, it will at least detect it from there as like a long press, which is good. It's just there's no feeling on the D-pad. You want to press, right? And I'm running into the edges here quite a bit. And I'm actually looking at the controller as I'm using it. This would not be one that I would really use with that. Like, it's very difficult to tell, I think, where you are on the D-pad. How's the turbo look? Yeah, there's turbo. So you just press and hold it down instead without it off. I actually like this more. So, I mean, there's more going on here, obviously, because you have switches for everything. But I do like the idea of having individual switches for buttons for turbo, as opposed to having to press and hold a turbo button down and then like macro set it to being on. I just like the mechanical nature of, okay, A is turbo, but like B is not. So you can kind of see the difference between them. You know, it's funny, they mention this as a way to fight like blisters or just discomfort on your thumb. This feels worse, like actually worse, because I'm hitting the edges because it's so concave down. I'm just hitting the edges, and it just from this little bit that I'm playing it, I'm also unsure as to how much I need to press down on it to get it to work. So if I like lightly touch it, it does still kind of do it. See that? Like I'm just kind of resting it on there. So like how they mentioned, you got to kind of claw grip it. Nah, it feels incredibly uncomfortable. And that's the thing. This was the biggest part about this generation, is having a solid D-pad, because all the games are so reliant on almost, I'd say, kind of precise movement when it comes to a platformer. And this is not going to hold up in most of those cases. But I will say it does what it says it does. It replaces the D-pad with a touch panel. So you know what, I'm kind of curious. Why don't we open this up and take a look at it? So they only have 6 screws on the back here, it looks like, unless there's one. No, nothing under the sticker. And this locks in, so it looks like we just have some Phillips head screws to remove. I think I got all the screws. There's one still kind of hovering in there. It's sticking around. Okay. Oh, wow, okay. So the whole front of it looks like it came off like that. What is good? Okay, so these are our switches at the top here. And then our front face buttons. And then our little circular pad, which is kind of just a thin piece of plastic, looks like, that just sits there. And here's the other side. The screw fell out, but we're good. And we have our main touch. Look at this guy. Wow. That looks, that was this thing I like about the controllers from this time period. It genuinely looks like something that like people just kind of soldered and put together in their garage, just based on the work that's done. And you see kind of the soldering work around it. So that's, to me, that's always been pretty fun. We also have, it looks like, I think these are just adjustments. Usually you see these potentiometers on, say, lasers or other things. This kind of looks like a way you can adjust. I don't know if it's the different directions coming out of here, because you can see each panel here. And the way this would work is you would honestly, it would just detect you pressing, completing the circuit or the loop, and then it would know, okay, he's pressing right or he's pressing down. That's kind of interesting the way that they have that set up, because if you look underneath of it, it's gonna be kind of hard to see. They just have wires from each one. So this is like a platform here, and then you have a wire from each one just running to the board, and it's pretty easy to follow the traces. Not even seated. It's just held in by the by the wires that are soldered, and then you have these posts around the corners. But you can follow the different traces, and yeah, it looks like it does. It just runs to these different potentiometers here that then run to the middle. Have like a chip here that would read all the inputs and then, of course, send it to the system. That is quite interesting. The buttons, though, they have a whole other platform here for this as well, and I think that's doing a similar thing where you see the cables here, but they have a whole other board just screwed to the top of it. There's a little start button too. So there you go. It would look just like that. And then it has these posts here that then connect and just kind of hold the whole thing down and together. So they didn't even really need screws to keep this whole pad in place, just using the plastics of the casing for the controller and then the wires underneath. It mentions on the back like it's patent pending. I mean, this is clearly early, I want to say early concept for them, but this is still an early version, I think, of what they eventually wanted for this. If, I guess, touch controls were going to catch on instead of the D-pad, but it never did. See, this is a controller that shows up in a generation that people still go back to and say, this is the best we had for D-pads. Companies still go back to the Super Nintendo, or you could say the Genesis, and will model their D-pads like you see with 8BitDo after those controllers, and it still holds up to this day to where people outright prefer those over some of the newer controllers that we get. So imagine being the company that thought, hey, maybe D-pads aren't the future and it's just going to be touch, and that's it. And they then commit the cardinal sin of replacing the D-pad in a generation that turns out was probably the best for D-pads. But let me know what you guys think about this down below. I just thought it was interesting, the concept of replacing the D-pad with a touch panel, because that's egregious to me. I kind of view this as just maybe it could be the worst. It feels like the worst controller because of what it did when it did it, eliminating the D-pad on some classic controllers. But let me know what you guys think about the Turbo Touch 360. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.